Good morning, I'm Chris Jansing. Big day for immigration, the issue moving forward on a couple of fronts. In 15 minutes, a House hearing is expected to produce what the committee chair calls a momentous debate. And later, the president will hold two separate meetings with labor leaders and with business leaders. One of the topics will be immigration reform. Homeland Security Secretary Janet Napolitano toured the California-Mexico border yesterday, saying government efforts are paying off.
We're going to continue to put every resource we can into our borders to make them safe and secure, to make them truly 21st century borders. But we need immigration reform to go along with this.
I want to bring in the National Journal's Chris Frates and Times Assistant Managing Editor Rana Foroohar. Good morning to both of you. You know, it is interesting that the president's strategy is very methodical. He's going to line up these various groups. Let me ask you first, Chris, about union, because they haven't always been on his side on immigration. The AFL-CIO was against immigration reform in 2007. Has something changed?
Absolutely. You're seeing the unions start to come on board here, and they're starting to signal that they understand that bringing all of these undocumented immigrants into the fold, making them legal, is going to increase union membership, which of course has been on the decline for many years. And what I'm watching today, Chris, is this House hearing, because we had last week the big unveiling of the Senate Gang of Eight. We had the framework, and I was talking to Marco Rubio yesterday, and I said, well, who's writing the legislation here? Who's running point for Republicans? Who's running point for Democrats? And he said, well, there's not really a system yet. You know, he has a piece that he's interested in, that he's going to be working on, security, border security, those kinds of things, but there's not a system. And in this House hearing, you have a group that has been together for 4 or 5 years. You know, we had a big cover story earlier, I guess last year now, in National Journal about you know, immigration and this secret group of Republicans and Democrats who had been meeting and had drafted legislation that they kept in a drawer because it was so politically unpopular. It was like Fight Club. Nobody wanted to talk about Fight Club because you know, they didn't want to run the risk of having talking about these very sensitive issues. They feel like they could move forward on that. The chairman of the House Judiciary Committee is in that group.
Yeah, the question becomes, how do you get people on the same page?
Gosh, you know, it's such an interesting question because I cover this from an economic perspective, and from that perspective, it's a no-brainer. Immigration is good both at the high end and at the lower end.
Well, let me ask you about this second group then, because you have all, if you read the Wall Street Journal, you know the names of these CEOs who are going to be in today with the president, Lloyd Blankfein, Steve Case, Marissa Mayer. Biggest complaint from companies is, correct me if I'm wrong, Rana, you know more about this, but we're not getting enough visas to highly skilled workers.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this has been going on for years and years and years, that there's been a shortage of engineers, of people with sci-tech backgrounds in the Valley. And this is something that's only going to continue to advance because industry right now in America, not just in Silicon Valley, but throughout the country, is becoming automated. You need a lot more PhDs. You need people with deep math backgrounds, and we don't churn enough of those people out in this country. So that, again, is a no-brainer. But I think that the union deal is very, very interesting because one of the more contentious parts of the immigration debate has been the sort of lower end of the spectrum. What do you do about creating a path to legalize immigration for folks that are coming in with lower skill sets? But you know what? It's impossible to find a serious piece of economic evidence that low-end immigration is overall bad for the economy. It's good. It's a net positive for the economy, all kinds of immigration, because those folks that are coming in, particularly if they're on a path to legalization, are not doing the same tasks. They're not going for the same jobs as, say, an American with a high school degree. Ultimately, this raises all boats, and it's something that the dynamism of our country is based upon.
And at the same time, the president, as he's done successfully in the past, he's got this idea to win over the public. And let me play for you a little part of that big speech he gave in Las Vegas.
Remember that this is not just a debate about policy. It's about people. It's about men and women and young people who want nothing more than the chance to earn their way into the American story.
There's a new Gallup poll out today, Chris. He has a 70% approval rating with Hispanics. We know they voted for him by 71%. Both sides are doing various things to try to court that vote. The Republicans got a real wake-up call in this last election. So in that sense, just a very pragmatic sense, is this something that has to get done?
Well, everybody says it has to get done, but I'm still not sure that it will get done. I think the president is smart here. He's playing outside in baseball. He's using his big approval ratings to force force lawmakers into seeing things his way. That gets a lot of complaints on the Hill, particularly from Republicans who say, why don't you come help us legislate something instead of campaigning all around the country on this? And the devil always with immigration is in the details. You talked about high skill immigration for one. Everybody agrees that we should have smarter people here, but that's a carrot in terms of a comprehensive bill. Nobody wants to just pass that one piece because then it gets it harder to make a path for citizenship for everyone else, because that's the harder piece of that. So they don't want to give up kind of these things that everybody agrees on and pass them piecemeal for fear that the things people don't agree on will then fall by the wayside.
Yeah, it's so the short-termism is really disappointing because I was just talking to General Electric, as a matter of fact, the other day. They've got a lot of new plants opening up, a lot of development in Silicon Valley. I mean, this isn't even a tech firm. They're saying we need more engineers, we need more people with STEM backgrounds, and we've got to get this done.
All right, let me bring in Congresswoman Judy Chu, who is Chris.
The one point with Eric Cantor, when he goes out today at AEI and gives his speech, the thing to remember as you're watching that is that he's not changing Republican policy. That Republican policy remains the same. He's trying to change the tone of Republicans, to not be as abrasive, to talk about these things in a way that appeals to parents, that appeals to minorities, that appeals to women, these groups that Republicans have had a hard time with. So you need to listen to this speech through that frame, and you will see that there's not going to be big shifts in policy on immigration or some of these other fiscal matters, but rather tone.
Republicans are also making a big deal about President Obama missing his budget deadline yesterday. This is the third year in a row. Let me play for you what Speaker Boehner had to say.
President Obama missed a great opportunity today to help our economy. This was supposed to be the day that the president submitted his budget to the Congress. But it's not coming. It's going to be late. And some reports say that it could be as long as a month late. I think that's too bad. Our economy could use some presidential leadership right now.
I find a lot of confusion out there with everyday people who come up to me and ask me questions. They don't understand these reports that the Senate hasn't passed a budget. Now the president is late with the budget. How much does this matter?
Well, not as much as you think. I mean, look, it's not great. It would have been nice if he would have made the deadline. But frankly, we were discussing this before we came on. There's going to be gridlock around budget issues no matter what. I mean, there is really no policy shift on either side. The fights are as they have been essentially since the fiscal cliff issues began months ago. So this is not something to be a game changer in any way.
Well, the president just signed the bill that raises the debt ceiling, and so in an age when these fiscal fights are, as you point out, they're the same, they're ongoing, they can be incendiary. We're always talking about a government shutdown of one kind or another. Where does this leave us?
It leaves us with a bunch of people who just fought the first fight, fiscal cliff and the debt limit, and the Senate Democrats are going to Annapolis today and tomorrow to try to figure out how do we move forward. How do we move forward with the budget? How do we move forward on funding the government? Both of those things need to be done, the budget by April 15th. Because
they have taken some hits, and do they really want to give Republicans any more ammunition?
Well, and that's why they've said we're going to do a budget, and they were happy to sign the debt limit increase meant that they had a deadline of April 15th where they don't get paid and they have to get a budget
Always
done.
A good incentive.
Always a good incentive there. So Democrats understand that they need, but this is going to be a partisan document by and large, a political document that said here's our spending priorities. Democrats believe when they put out their budget, it will say this is a balanced approach compared to the Republicans who want to cut and are taking us down the road of austerity. So even when we have these budgets out, Chris, we're not going to see any kind of, oh, well, now there's a plan. It will still be a political.
Well, and I wonder if the conversation changes, because I think a lot of people have been surprised when so much talk was about the economy and jobs, that really the early part of this year and the early part of this Congress has been dominated by immigration, gun control, not a lot about the economy.
No, and it's interesting. I mean, one bit of bright news, frankly, in all of this is that the underlying data in the real economy is pretty positive. Aside from the fourth quarter, which was a one-off, that was about that downturn was about cuts in spending and sort of one-time business inventory issues. Things are improving. The jobs numbers were solid. Consumption is solid. You've got growth continuing in the housing market and construction. So things are better certainly than they were 6 months ago or a year ago.
All right, Chris Frates, Rana Foroohar, thanks to both of you for coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you.